I guess that means we're live. Hello and welcome to the ICCANB YouTube channel. This is something new that we started just this year in light of everything that has happened to change what is ordinarily a year filled with events and gatherings. My wife is doing the videoing, and it was her idea that maybe we should do something Christmas-like. And so what we're doing is making our traditional Christmas steamed crumb pudding and hard sugar sauce. And that recipe goes back to my late grandmother's family and has been in our family for about 100 years. I've been making this pudding for almost 50 years. My father made it for 25 years before that, and my grandmother for 35 years before that. So when you add that all up, it's a lot of years for one pudding for one family. I'm going to start by flouring, greasing the bowl that we use, which actually is a bundt pan or a funnel cake pan. So we're going to do that first, and then while I do that, I'll explain a little bit about the background of the Driscoll family in Halifax. So I have my wax paper. And once again, you've got to do this properly. You've got to get all the nooks and crannies in this, because you don't want a steamed pudding to stick. Trust me, I've done it many times. So this recipe, as I said, goes back to my late grandmother on my father's side. Her name was Annie Agnes Kane. She was born in 1894. She married Clifford Walter Driscoll in Halifax, Nova Scotia in 1917, merging two Irish-Canadian families in the city of Halifax. The recipe probably came on her mother's side, although we doubt that my grandmother Annie, or Mum as we call her, would have made this recipe in the first year of her marriage, because on December 6th of 1917, two ships, one of which was loaded with munitions for the First World War, collided in the Halifax harbor on the morning of December 6th and exploded. And I think everybody knows the history of the Halifax explosion, but for my family, it was a very intimate one. My grandfather was working in the rail yards. My grandmother, who was pregnant with their first child, was with her parents, luckily, because the explosion crashed through the house that they were staying in, killed my grandfather's brother, who was 9 years old, and leveled the city of Halifax. And that's a story that's been passed down through generations in our family, but it's a story that Maritimers know quite well. In fact, after that happened, the other provinces got together and provided help to the city, and of course the city of Boston and the state of Massachusetts did as well. And that's remembered every year when Nova Scotia sends a Christmas tree to Boston, Mass, in honor of the relief that was given by the state of Massachusetts and the city of Boston. So what we'll do from here on, and I suppose I should mention the fact, although it's not necessarily a pleasant thing, that there were almost 2,000 people killed in that explosion and 9,000 injured, and the city of Halifax was essentially leveled. It had to be rebuilt, and the year after that was 2 years of the Spanish flu. So not an easy time, and something I think that we can all relate to and never expected to have to as we go through this pandemic. So here's a family event that doesn't mean you have to go out, and it doesn't mean you're missing anything. It means you're doing something that brings joy to the family, and we're going to make a steamed crumb pudding. So I've got this floured and lined, and I'll set it, floured and greased, and I'll set it aside, of course. And then I'll grab this bowl, which already has half a cup of shortening in it. I'm going to add to that a cup of brown sugar. And I'm going to cream this well. So this will take a minute or so. Then I'll start adding the ingredients, and I'll tell you a little bit about one of those ingredients because it had to be done ahead of time. There's a lot of fruit that goes into this, as well as crumbs. And generally, and this isn't part of the recipe, but it was something our family always did, I take the fruit, the apples and the mixed fruit and dried peel. I get all of that done up the day before, and then I usually soak that in rum, and you'd want a dark rum, or in brandy, and you can soak that for a couple of hours, you can soak it overnight. As it happens, the fruit I'm using was soaked for about a day. And if there was any excess liquid left over, I suppose you would throw it out, but I suppose you could also drink it if you wanted to. So there, that's fairly well creamed. I need a knife. I'm using a wooden spoon, my preferred method of baking. I like a wooden spoon. I think a lot of people do. So, we've got that together, and we're going to add, and you'll notice that all the ingredients were done ahead of time, or else you'll be listening to this video for a very long while. We're going to take a slightly beaten egg, and we're going to add that to these wet ingredients. Mix that up well. Like any baking that you do, the better it's mixed, the better it'll turn out. That's always, or often seems to be easier said than done. So that's well mixed. Now previously, as we get everything ready here, previously I took 1 1/4 cups of flour, a half a teaspoon of salt, a teaspoon of baking soda, and a teaspoon of cinnamon. And I blended all of that together in a separate bowl, which I am now going to add to this mix. I might want to wait on that because I think I've got to put my sour milk in first. It's a good thing I got the recipe here, I'd forget. Now how do you make sour milk? Because I need a cup of sour milk. So I've got a measuring cup. In the bottom of that, I've got some reconstituted lemon juice here. In the bottom of that, I'm going to add a tablespoon of lemon juice. And to that tablespoon of lemon juice, I'm going to fill the measuring cup up the rest of the way with enough milk to make 1 cup. And you've just soured your milk. I'll just stir that together. And add that to this liquid measure, to these liquid ingredients, to make this fairly runny. Now we'll get back to taking our dry ingredients, putting all of that flour mixture in. And again, the issue of getting this well mixed, I think anybody that cooks understands that. In the background of what we're doing here, I can hear the family cat tearing around the floor. All right. Now, we're going to add 2 cups of fine dried breadcrumbs. And we're going to add the fruit. We'll see if there's any moisture. There's not really. We should be good to go. So that's ready to go. That's our ingredients all put together. What we're going to do now is we're going to fill a large pot up with as hot water as I can get out of the tap. That's going to go on the stove. We're going to put our ingredients in our baking dish. Again, it's a bundt pan or a funnel cake pan because you need something to let the steam escape, because this is going to be steamed for about an hour and a half, an hour and a quarter, until it's done, and you check it at the end with a toothpick to make sure that it comes out clean, and then you'll turn it out. But you're looking at keeping an eye on that for an hour and a quarter, and I'll show you what happens when we cover that. So right now, I'm going to get the water. And back. So what I've done is I've filled this pot a little over halfway, because you want just enough water to get up to the bottom of the cooking pan, but you don't want the water too high. You obviously don't want it to boil over. So it's going to depend on the pan that you use to put the hot water in and to cook this, as to how much water you're putting in. One of the nice advantages about a pan with a hole in the middle is that you can add water afterwards. So I'm going to take this over to the stove. And I'll turn that on, because that will take a while to come to a full heat. And in the meantime, this pan is pretty well finished off. I'll just clean that out, and invariably there'll be something that didn't get flour on it properly. I might be able to add a bit. I think all that happens with these containers is that the finish eventually goes, and then things just don't stick to it. All right. I'll do this without making too much of a mess. You obviously want to put it in there to get it as even as possible, but since it's more of a liquid batter, you're able to move it around a bit. That really is a key. You want to get this as even as you possibly can. You don't want to miss too much, but you should leave just enough left so you can test this to make sure it's okay. What we're going to do to keep the heat in here is we're going to cover this with tin foil, carefully. Because I'll be able to fold this over. Now if you really, I have a pan, as it happens, the pot I put on the stove has a rim on it that just fits this pan. So I'll be able to rest this on top of that and then cover it. If you don't have a pot of that style and you have to put this right down, then you're going to need to put a small rack in the bottom of that so that you raise the bottom of this pan off the bottom of the pot so that you're steaming this. Because you don't want that right down onto the bottom of the container. So I've got that done. And I need a pair of scissors or a knife. Maybe I'll use a knife. Because you've got to take the middle of this. I guess I should be more, not used to explaining my actions doing this, but you simply trim it and then fold it under. So now you have a space for the heat, for the steam to come out. We're going to take this and we're now going to put this in our pot on the stove, and that actually fits quite nicely. And if I had my cover, which is over here, I'm going to take my cover and put that over the top. And that'll keep a measurable amount of the steam in. Keep that cooking. All right. So I think for right now, we'll take a pause and we'll come back and make the sauce. All right, we're back. We have our pudding on the stove, steaming, and what we'll do is we'll periodically check in the hole in the bun pan, or you would check if you used a funnel pan. Periodically check to make sure that the water isn't getting too low, because you don't want anything to boil dry. But that takes, like I say, an hour and a quarter, an hour and a half. So you've got to check on it. You've got to make sure you've got enough water in there. That shouldn't be a problem. What we're going to do now is make the hard sugar sauce that goes with this. I have the ingredients all laid out. This won't take much time. I've got one whole egg in this bowl, and I'm simply going to beat it until it's as fluffy as I can make it. Alright, I think we've done just fine. Now I'm making a single recipe. For that whole pudding, you would probably make a double recipe. But I'm just making a single one. I'm now adding 1 cup of white sugar. That's 1 cup of white sugar. I think I may have put too much white sugar in here. I'm going to double check it. I'm not sure, but these things can happen. So we'll just give me a second and I'll... Well, I checked, and I think the problem that I had is I'm used to making a double recipe all the time. And I looked at the white sugar I'd measured out and went, wow, did I do a double recipe? Turned out I didn't. I've got a single cup of white sugar. I'll now add that. So that's well mixed. I'm now going to add a 1/4 cup of soft butter. Once I do that and mix that in, I will then be adding some vanilla, but not too much. And then I'll be adding some lemon zest. I'm using real lemon for this, any real lemon. I'll use a little bit of lemon zest, and then I will use real lemon juice, and I'll have to taste it as I go along because you've got to get it at just the right taste. We're doing perfectly. So I've added some lemon zest. I'll mix that in. I'm using real vanilla, not artificial vanilla, so I'm going to measure it just because I don't want to overdo it. I would think that should be plenty. When you're using vanilla in particular, one of the things that you can check with on a recipe is when the color of your batter changes, because the vanilla does add a brown flavor. In that case, I use roughly a 1/2 teaspoon of vanilla. I would probably use more than that ordinarily. If I were making a double recipe, obviously I'd use a lot more than that. Now we'll add some fresh lemon juice. Taste that, see how we made out. I think we want a tiny bit more. sure that'll do us. Perfect. So what we'll do now with this hard sugar sauce, or what we ordinarily do, is I put this in the freezer and leave it until we're ready to use it, which ordinarily would be obviously after supper. The pudding will still be warm. If the pudding isn't warm, you just warm it up in the microwave and then put your hard lemon sauce on to your taste. And that is the complete recipe. We have a steamed crumb pudding on the stove. We have a hard lemon sauce that'll go on top of it, ready to go, and we'll be back. So Christmas dinner's over, and we're now down to the dessert part, and you have your choice. You could have a fancy Christmas dinner with Christmas plates, or you could have a far more casual Christmas dinner with a bowl and a teacup. And notice there are always teacups. So we have our pudding, we have our sauce, the tea kettle is on, we're just waiting to have dessert. So here we are, we have 2 desserts served and ready to go. You can see what we've cut out. We have our sauce here, which means we're going to be having more of this. What we hope is that you've enjoyed the video, that you might want to try this recipe, and if you do, we hope you enjoy it, and let us know. Thank you for watching.